Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Moment Mastermind. I am Shira Litzar, happy to be your co-host today, along with my colleague, Vern Schellinger. We are delighted to answer your job search questions. So I know that there's going to be a topic I'm going to be speaking about here in a second about resumes. Give me a second until Diana logs on here. But before I do that, I just wanted to see if there are any other questions that, that kind of are top of mind for you that we can address. Anything?
No burning issues?
No burning issues?
Job interview.
I'm sorry?
Job interview.
Do you want to ask a question about interviewing?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's your question?
I'm still stumbling. Tell me about yourself. So I know I use the star, but on the task, how many tasks do I list? Do I list my key point tasks and accomplish? So like I try to say tell me about myself. I try to listing what I have done, what I have accomplished on the task, but I don't know like how many points do I need to say.
Okay, so let me try to answer that. I'm going to separate out your question, and then Vern, feel free to chime in here.
Yeah.
So first of all, there's a difference between the question, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
And then somebody asking you someone asking you to give an accomplishment story. It's two different things.
Oh, okay.
Tell me about yourself is about your background and why they should be considering you at all. Like, why are you here? Why are you interested?
Okay.
Like, that's one question. But when they ask you about accomplishment stories, describe a time when you did this. Tell me about a time when you did that. That's where the star story comes in. So let me explain the star story. And different people have different formulas for it. Some people say STAR, situation, task, action, result.
Yeah.
Some people say SAR, situation, action, result.
Okay.
Some people say, the one that I like is called CAB, challenge, action, benefit. It's all kind of the same thing. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to ask you about a very specific point in time. A story. That's all that it is. It's just a story. Okay. So let's use SAR, situation, action, result. What was the situation that was going on in the organization? And kind of what was the problem you were trying to solve?
Okay.
What were the actions that you took to solve it? And then what was the result? Okay. That's the general idea. So it's not about you talking about lots of tasks. It's about one story.
Okay.
It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in the middle, when you're talking about your actions, you're talking specifically about those actions you took to solve the problem. Now, in the question, they're probably going to put in what's called a soft skill. Tell me about a time when you used your critical thinking skills. Tell me about a time when you had to be a team player. Tell me about a time when you learned something or you made a mistake or whatever.
Okay.
So when you're telling the story, frame the story in light of the question. So, tell the story from that angle.
Okay.
Right? Not just any old story, tell the story, but address the question that they're asking, which is again, typically a soft skill. Okay. A behavioral skill. The tell me about yourself is basically, why should we be considering you? Because they have your resume, but why you for this job? So you're not going to talk about your whole background. You're not going to go all the way back to the beginning. You're going to say something like, I am a such and such professional, right? I have great successes in these kinds of areas. And the reason why I'm here is X. Okay. In other words, you want to align your background with why you are there for this job. Here's a little bit about my backstory, but here's why I'm here. Here's what interests me about this role. Because when they say, tell me about yourself, they're not just asking you for their health. They actually want you to connect the dots between where you've been and why you're here. And then that's a kind of vague sort of answer. I have to know your specific situation. But all I can tell you is that they need you to connect the dots. Okay. a little bit about your background and how that connects with your interest in this role and why your career has led you to this place in order for you to be sitting in that interview with that job.
So for example, the job posting is for nonprofit charity. So I can set, like, I have many experience working for the charity. I find that the job is aligned with my background, my education, my experience. Like, I'm specialized in financial analysis. I manage like $10 million budgets, like, and I work very well with management. And at the end, all my budgets is aligned with actual spending, something like that.
Well,
Something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that for the job itself, right? You want to look at the job announcement, look exactly what they need.
Yep.
And align your
Okay.
background with it.
Okay,
I
got
noticed you're looking for somebody who can do this. I've done this.
Okay, got it.
We're
Okay.
trying to parallel it.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Thank you. I
Yeah,
got mixed up all the time. Now I got it. Thank you.
That's okay.
Yeah, the other thing I would say about the tell me about yourself question, the biggest mistake people make is they go
Yeah.
on way too long.
Yeah.
I know. I
Way
wish all
too
the job
long.
have done.
I just interviewed somebody last week and I said, tell me about yourself. And it was like a 5 minute to 10 minute, and then way too long. And I really encourage, and I know Shira does this too, sit down and write, the answer to tell me about yourself, kind of in a general way, so that you have that. And then to Shira's point, modify that to the specific job that you're looking for, change it up for the specific job. But if somebody says, tell me about yourself, there are certain things that you're probably going to tell every employer about yourself. So I'm going to say I'm an experienced human resource professional and I've got skills in these different areas. You're going to have maybe that first sentence yourself, but for your specific area. But really write that out and be able to say that very comfortably and recognize that you want to keep it to a minute, 2 minutes at the most.
Right.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm good. Thank you. Got it. I got mixed up all the time. I said, oh my God. That's why I asked, like, how many points do I need to say in there? Now I've got to specific myself to the job. Why I'm qualified for it.
Well, and the same thing goes for the star stories. You really should write those out and that by writing them out and reading them and edit them and that repetition will help you remember it better when you're in the interview.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Exactly.
Wow, good.
All right, other questions, because I do want to actually talk about resumes today, because I had an offline question from somebody where we talked about that. I promised that I would talk about it today, but any other questions before I talk about resumes? Okay, so I want to share a little bit of perspective on resumes. Okay, let me tell you what they are and what they're not.
So
What they
I have a question. So can I just ask you?
Oh, I'm
before
sorry.
we-
Oh,
Yeah, so
sure.
what-
Question?
So in job searching field, right? So as you guys all know, the new thing that come up in the industry, especially in software in engineering industry, it's called ChatGPT. Perhaps you all
ChatGPT.
familiar.
Yeah.
So that thing that happens, it's like it even though it doesn't like optimize all the thing together, like it cannot do everything, but it is doing some, like, let's say you have a small work to do, then you can do with this easily. So this is the reason that the companies is not really hiring the juniors, because even though a junior developer do even more than that, but they're they kind of hiring slowly. Like if a company before the ChatGPT, they need like tens of developers. So currently they are hiring for like 5. And so that's my question. Like, so in for this reason, the kind of job market is a little bit of downer. You get my point?
I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, my question is like in this current situation. So as a junior. So what I should do? Does that make sense, or is there it?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, I understand the market is changing, and unfortunately,
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in ChatGPT. In fact, I'm not sure quite who is, but because it's so new. Yeah, it sounds like you're right. The market is changing. I don't have specific advice. Hey, Susan.
Okay,
I
that's
don't have specific advice around that particularly. I think what you'd need to do is, you know, on Meetup, right? Go find maybe a meetup for software engineers and
okay.
or developers, right? People who specialize in that sector.
Yeah.
And they can maybe give you more specific current advice around what's going on with ChatGPT as it relates to your profession.
Okay.
Steve,
Okay.
do you have anything to add?
Oh, that's right. It's your world.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a couple of weeks. If I'm kind of parsing through that, ChatGPT allows people to put in a set of information and have it spit out the bulk of, say, work. So you give it a question about how would you respond to this particular ad given your resume or your kind of background or what have you, and it'll sit there systematically and write out using these formulas and algorithms and what have you, a cover letter or a work history or what these things are. And some of what I think the impact, or at least the initial impacts that's having, is it's forcing people to look at requirements for filling jobs between a junior and a senior level very differently, to say, well, if somebody has had or worked in AI for X number of years, whether it's in development or user interface pieces or what have you, maybe those companies are now looking for more enhanced requirements than they would have been maybe a year or two ago because of this GPT component. Because otherwise, I could sit there and I am, let's be 100% clear, I'm in technology, but I'm in everything but programming over the course of my years. So it's just something I don't do. I could sit there and write out or have GPT kick out for me, white papers or treatises or a new resume or things like that. Does that prove I have the skill that I'm going after? I don't necessarily know. I don't know that there's a measurable test yet, or a consistent level of test for that. And I think that's going to be in the next 12 to 18 months or maybe longer. That's going to be the proof of the pudding of whether it's ChatGPT or now Google launched their version of this same product called Bard this week. How effective are these things? How are recruiters and talent acquisition people able to parse out, hey, this sounds like ChatGPT, or this really is the person? What does it do to that part of the recruiting and hiring process? Are they going to look for more years of experience because they make an assumptive guess that somebody might use? I mean, it's that whole can of worms that's kind of opened up, I guess, would be my take on it.
Yeah, is my mute on?
You're good.
I mean, I'm not muted. I'm sorry. No, I was just going to add to what you said, Sherry. Your advice, it was really excellent, I think, about getting into his community. And because everything is moving so quickly, and a lot of it is at the discussion stage, but a lot of it is even more than that. And companies like Salesforce and HubSpot, and they're incorporating it into their software, and they're doing that now. It's like the future is now in this spot. So either through, of course, attending some of these webinars, but for his specialty, I think getting with his community and, of course, reading any of the articles related to that would be essential.
Yeah, so as a rule, I would definitely recommend go find software engineers, software developers who can give you some solid advice on that.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so another question is like, so in terms of resume writing, so most of the people like using ChatGPT to write their resumes. So I don't think like how the recruiter kind of understand that this specific resume is written by ChatGPT or this one is written by a person.
I think, Stephen, you just started to talk about that, right? I don't think they'll necessarily be able to know that, right?
Yeah, I think that's part and parcel of what you're going to hear more recruiting talent professionals, both in corporate, government, and not-for-profit arenas, talking about is to say, I'm a hiring manager, or I'm an HR generalist. I'm running the applicant tracking pieces, but I'm also looking at these resumes. Are there patterns? Can I deduce that this person pushed their information through ChatGPT, or has it become so synonymous with regular templates and resume writing that the average person cannot, without getting geeky and lots of terminology? That's really the test of artificial intelligence, is when you can't determine whether a human wrote this or a computer wrote this. That's what that test is for. So I don't know what hiring managers are going to do with that. I think we're going to start to see more articles and more coverage and more kind of thought put into, are there testing pieces that say, I took the same resume, I put it through, a regular service, a person, whoever, and then I took the same detail and pushed it through a ChatGPT. And here's the two products. What are the differences between the two?
I think what's probably happening, I'm guessing that right now tech recruiters are having this conversation. I'm guessing that they are chatting about this and saying to each other, how do we determine, what's real and what's not? That would be my presumption.
Yeah. And I wonder, another test might be if somebody did it in, Chat GPT, and then you're in the interview and you're asked questions and you can't
Right,
answer
you
the
can't answer them.
questions. then that's gonna, as a recruiter, that's gonna make me a little suspicious of, do you really have these skills? Your resume says you have these skills, but based on your answers to my questions, they don't seem to be jiving with what's on your resume.
Right.
I again, to your point, Steve, who knows? I mean, it may be that good where you're not going to, if the person can answer the questions, then that's all that really matters to the recruiter, probably.
Right. But I think to your and Shira's point earlier, I think that's part and parcel of understanding and practicing your narrative, your star cab, whatever stories, understanding that there's more that goes into what's on the paper. I can put enough to fill a page and a half or 2 pages of, that in a resume, but there's the whole backstory and considerations. And if I'm doing a star story, I might be talking about, budget considerations where I don't necessarily list that in some narratives. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So yeah, Vern, I agree. I think to your point, there's going to be a delineated difference and it's going to shake out. It's going to be interesting to see where it shakes out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say people will probably be creating new job roles just before the end of the year. Like there was one that I read about called prompt engineers. This was an article in the Washington Post. It's very important that you feed in the right question, and that question is called a prompt. And there are people who are getting skilled prompt engineers on how you do that, because of course the way you feed the machine information is very important to what you get back, the degree of detail, et cetera, et cetera. So I would think anyone who's interviewing someone now wants to know at least that they are aware. People are learning, and experimenting themselves with the different programs and software, but at least that they are part of the conversation. I would think that's what's important right now.
Yeah.
Understanding it,
Yeah.
knowing what's going on and just understanding the basics.
Yeah. It sounds like it's going to be a whole new profession.
Whole new world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
It's going to impact everybody.
Exactly.
Han, you're on mute.
What is GPT a lot of talking about now? I don't know.
What is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I could try to explain it, but I think Steve, if you want to give maybe just like a one line, just sort of a.
Yeah, a lot of talking. I don't know what is it.
It's basically a computer program that will take small pieces of information and write out larger, say, paragraphs or documents or what have you. So if you think about writing your resume, you could give it very simplistic dates and details and some small pieces of info, and it'll actually write out a full, complete narrative and resume for you. Just given our scenario here, that's what ChatGPT is.
You could write a report, a paper, an article.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
I can
maybe.
add a little bit about that. Okay, it's sort of kind of. Do you ever heard about the artificial intelligence? Because we
Yes,
kind
that's
of
what it is.
using this.
Artificial intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah. So before, like, when you write an email, so when you like start writing email on Gmail, you see there auto completion. Some text is appearing, a little bit of blur version. So those things are, or like artificial comes even before than this ChatGPT, right? But when it comes to ChatGPT, it just come in more massive, interactive ways. Okay, so not just resume writing, you can do anything, pretty much anything. So whatever question that you have, and you can just ask and it will give the answer. So if you want like a precise answer, you can give a precise answer. Like in ChatGPT 4, they have like 3 different options, right? So if you want an elaborate answer, they can give you elaborate answer. If you want a precise answer, he's gonna give you the precise answer. So it's kind of, it does have a huge information stored in its engine. So even whatever question in your mind, you can put out over there and it will just generate your answer. So you can pretty much ask anything and you can get information from it, whether it is like blog writing, coding, resume writing, whatever you want. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Hung, does that make, I know it's complicated, but does that generally answer your question?
Yeah.
Hung, you're on mute. Yeah, you can, by the way,
Oh,
you can
I
leave
got it.
yourself off of mute if you like.
Yeah, I got some. Stephen put on the link on the chat about the app for the GPT.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got it. Thank you so much.
yeah. Yeah.
Did that take away the job for people writing report?
Well, that's what Azharil was asking, you know, how, to what extent in his world, for example, is that going to impact software developers, or like you're saying, is it, I don't, you know, probably, you know,
No, not
technology has been doing that for years.
not only
That's no
software
good, eh?
developers,
But
also
I
like,
think that's not good because everyone's different. Everyone use GPT, so everything writing so genetic, like similar.
So what they're saying is that as an expert in whatever your expertise is, you're supposed to look at what ChatGPT wrote for you and then edit it, right?
Yeah.
Put in your expertise to make sure that what it gave you is accurate. Now, how well that's going to work, I think this is, it's a whole new world. I think we're all going to be navigating this for a while. Academia is dealing with this. Students are going to use it, are already using it to write their own reports. You know,
Yeah,
and
like
it's got a lot of implications. Susan's a professor, and I'm sure she's dealing with this too. So, I mean, the implications are vast.
like copyright, right? Copy, like you copy
Copywriting
and edit it.
Mm.
So that's why I said like human being so unique, individual. If GPT like so genetic, everybody like similar because they copy and edit it, but the basic idea is still there.
okay, so
Oh, that's
it's like
interesting.
ChatGPT kind of it's like the static job is taking away from ChatGPT, because if you're a creative person, then no one can replace you, right? So if you were like not improving yourself, let's say you are an article writer, average regular article writer, so then you are going to be replaced through ChatGPT, right? So if you let's say this, I'm a copywriter, I just want to write a specific article for a specific topic, right? So if you just ask the ChatGPT like that, yeah, I want this kind of article, then it will like generate a precise article. So it will not much more creative, but it is kind of average article. So if you're an average person, then you're going to be replaced with ChatGPT. But if you're a creative person, then you're always valuable.
Yeah, and I'll just add as a writer that people are being cautioned that there are inaccuracies and you have to be very careful in terms of the research. They've got GPT-4 now, so it's supposed to have been an improvement on GPT-3. However, in terms of citing, it makes things up. So everyone has to be very careful with using it. You are cautioned not to just simply copy. It's good for creating outlines and research, some research, but you have to be very careful because, and also they call it hallucinations. It basically makes stuff up. So it's the credibility there is still, credibility is not quite, we can't trust it yet.
Yeah, I mean, think of it too. It's like, for how many years now have we been using Google to search for things? Google comes up with whatever Google comes up with, and it's been a research tool we've sort of relied upon. That doesn't mean that just because somebody wrote it on the internet, it's accurate. So we've been dealing with this for years anyway, but this is just, I think, a more extreme version of that, of needing to vet, material.
Yeah.
So anyway, to be
Google
continued.
is really going through hard times.
Huh?
Okay, I mean, just Google is going through a hard time, right? Google is like people moving to the Microsofts, right? To Google, right? Google, as I have heard someone is talk about like Google Brad or something, but Brad is like way different than ChatGPT. It is not even close to the ChatGPT. So Google Brad is like a child to ChatGPT, right?
Interesting.
So Google is like lagging in this point.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
Moving quickly, for sure.
Mhm.
All right. So any other questions before I jump into resumes?
I have one question, Shira. Do you have any upcoming talks or know of any on behavioral interviewing?
It's interesting. Right before you came on today, I just did a little bit on behavioral interviewing. Yeah, no, that's okay. So I actually have, well, let's see. Did I talk about it? I have a video presentation I did on interviewing, and I honestly cannot remember if there was. If I talked about it, I'm going to put the link in, and you can see.
Thank you.
If
I'm
it's-
just wondering about how, when you're a person where that's not natural to you, how to build the skill set for it.
For sure. Yeah, it's a very important.
All right, everyone, good evening.
Sorry, just pulled up the link. Okay, here's the video. On
Thank you.
interviewing. You're welcome. And actually, on that page, I also have the slide deck. So the slide deck will show you. Actually, you know what? Let me do this. This page here has all of my job search videos. That second link on that page, halfway down, it says interviews that land the offer. Underneath that, it says slide deck. So you can quickly go through and see if I happen to mention it.
Thank
I
you.
mean, in a nutshell, Susan, behavioral interviewing is asking people to tell me about a time when you did this or experienced this. And what the interviewer is looking for is how well does your answer match up with the skills and behaviors we need in this job. They need in the job.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, and the difficulty as the person who's seeking the job, I mean, the behavioral interviewing question could be anything. And so it's hard to prepare for, all of the possible behavioral interviewing questions. But what would be a good exercise is look at some of what Shira's pointing to, Google behavioral interviewing questions. You'll see some of the questions, and then think about how would I answer this question, and write a story in terms of how you would answer that question. That'll at least give you some practice and some confidence that if I'm asked a behavioral interviewing question, I'm not starting from zero.
Yeah, and here's another way to do it. Like, that's a great way, right? And like, there's all these ands. There's no ors, just ands. Another way is to do it from the reverse. Okay, where you come up with accomplishment stories, which, by the way, should be in your resume anyway. Okay, this is a repurposing thing. You would take an accomplishment story from your resume. And my analogy is to treat it like an accordion, you know, like a musical instrument, an accordion. Okay, stretch it out. And what you do is you take that story and you look at all of the different kinds of soft skills. That's what behavioral interview is about. A behavioral interview question is looking for your behavioral skills, your soft skills. So take any one story and sort of say, well, who was I being? Who was I being in the story? What was I doing? I was being a team player. I was being a critical thinker. I was using my resourcefulness. I was overcoming obstacles. I was meeting deadlines, whatever. So what you can do is if you have a few of those stories down, whatever the behavioral question is that comes at you, you can oftentimes turn it in that angle, in that direction, sort of just quarter turn to the right and say, okay, well, let me describe a story for you where I use that skill, where I was demonstrating this kind of behavior. So instead of having 15 stories, you can have 3, 4, or 5 maybe, but any one of them should be able to be turned in the direction of that soft skill, that behavioral skill, right? So the better you know your stories, the easier it's going to be for you to come up with that particular angle. Does that make sense?
It does. And I have some work to do. I got to final rounds on an interview I was really gunning for. And I had a working executive panel discussion where the corporate culture style was to take the corporate values and ask you questions on the corporate values.
Right.
And I really had prepared very differently for the interview, and my mind just kind of snapped in a less cohesive way. So I thought I should really bone up on this, especially especially when you're needing to demonstrate your management as well as technical skills. So
it's complicated. It really is. Because there's also not only the actual stories, some people call them, I was mentioning this earlier, SAR story, situation, action, result, or situation, task, action, result, or CAB, challenge, action, benefits, all the same thing. There's specific stories, but then there's sort of generically your philosophy about things, right? Tell us about your values and XYZ. That's not really a story per se. That's kind of.
Yeah, it really threw me a curve. And I was just like, oh crap, why didn't I think to practice this? So
well, that's the other thing.
any comment, if anyone has any comments on that, Sharon, everyone else, and here to improve and learn. So
well, that's what I said. It's almost impossible to prepare for every potential behavioral interviewing question you could get asked. So when you do get a tough question, one of the things you can do is just, say to the interviewer, that's a great question. Let me think about that for 5 or 6 seconds, or, let me think about that for a few seconds, just to give yourself a pause, and maybe, something will come to you in those few seconds that is a better answer than if you just blurted something out.
I think if I can jump in, I think the other thing, when that's come up, I've done the same thing, but I've taken, if the situation warrants or gives you the opening, I've taken the time while I'm thinking to clarify, was there something in what they said that they really meant X versus Y? And that allowed me to help hone that narrative even more specifically to what they were asking, because you don't want to get down that rabbit hole, for one. You also don't want to go down the wrong rabbit hole. So if they really meant X and you're talking about Y, they're going to pick up on that. So I'll take the 5 or 6 second pause. I'll let them clarify if it's appropriate, and then I'll have that story kind of teed up and be ready to go. So
also, I found it, I just wondered what you guys' perspective is, just to be current with future interviews and what's being done in the market now. But this was a final rounds executive working peer panel. And I kind of thought they would be talking more about the job. It was all values-based questions, period. And I came away with, even if I had aced it, like I didn't learn anything about the job from it. And I was kind of surprised.
They were trying to learn about you and how well you would fit in with
them.
Values that they believe in. That's what that was all about. So in other words, if pick a value. You know, every company has, you know, some values. You know, they're going to ask you about that value, and then you've got to say something about maybe an experience you've had where you've demonstrated that value, or talk about, and it doesn't even have to be work related. It could be personal, it could be volunteer work, it could be anything where you've kind of demonstrated that you understand that value, you've behaved in a way that supports that value. But again, that's so hard in the moment to come up with that sometimes.
And Susan, it also speaks to the fact that there is no one way of interviewing. And a lot of employers don't necessarily put themselves in the shoes of the candidate to figure out what does the candidate need to know, right?
No.
Oftentimes employers take a bit of a lopsided view. We're vetting you. Are you good for us? Rather than are we good for you, right? And that's just, it's just for whatever reason, inexperience, lack of whatever. It's not even necessarily a blight on them. It's just, they just don't know. Right? They're thinking we're the recruiter, we're the interviewers, right? We're here to make sure you're good for us.
Yeah.
Some of us know that it needs to be good for you too. And so we've got to provide to you, right, the information that you need. But that's just, again, it could just be ignorance on their part in terms of how to do a proper interview. But what it actually does say to me is that culture is very important to them. So that should tell you something too, that they're really, really vetting very well to make sure everybody aligns with the values, which means if you do get the job, likely it's going to be with people who have the same kind of value system.
Yeah. In fact, if I was interviewing for a job, let's suppose there was no talk about values. I was interviewing for a job. When they say, do you have any questions? I would say something like, well, I noticed that your values are X, Y, and Z. Can you give me an example of how X value actually happens within this organization? Because I'd want to know that they're not just words on the wall, which is what most values are in most organizations, but they truly believe in that value. They demonstrate that value. They're able to give you some tangible examples and say, wow, they really do, really do employ this value in the way they run the company. And if that's a value that's near and dear to your heart, then that's a good thing for you to know that, wow, this could be a great place for me to work if I was lucky enough to get the offer.
Yeah, the fact that they're even asking you specific questions says to me that they're trying to embed that into their culture if they haven't already.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, I think those kind of questions, especially in a panel interview, when I've seen that before, I've taken the time to make it a two-way conversation if it wasn't necessarily geared for that. And that to me will tell me something about those peers as well. To Vern's point about if they're heavily value driven, are they practicing them in the examples they're giving me, or is it just lip service? Or can I push for those specific kind of engagements where they felt very proud about their role in XYZ project and their collaboration with people in the room, because those are going to, if that's the panel, those are going to be your coworkers. So it's going to be your peers. Those are going to be the relationships that you have to build into. And I want to know that if somebody's questioning, the commitment to values, and that's very important to them, that they're practicing what they preach. So.
Those are all good points, and I appreciate you saying them. I, did ask at the end, what advice would you have for the incoming candidate, incoming person? And they all got in their body language, and one stood up and spoke, but you could see it was universal. They said, in your onboarding, you better be building relationships. You won't succeed here if you don't have the right relationships. And that meant, sharing all your personal stuff and your work stuff. And they were really on top of that, the heavy way. But thank you all. It just, I lesson learned for me. Shara's point about always having your 5 cab stories down for every twist is just punctuation that.
I will also suggest that along these lines, Susan, that what kinds of questions the interviewer does ask you says a lot about the organization and the role and what's important to them. Okay, they're not just asking us for their health. Whatever the questions are, whether it's functional questions, behavioral questions, anything. That means that's top of mind for them. They're only asking because it's important, which should tell you about who they are.
Yeah, I outside of a first screening interview, I went through all these rounds and it had very few technical questions. It was all,
About who you are. Mhm.
Yeah.
Culture is
and I
very
was kind
important
of
to them.
stunned. I was really stunned by not having an even mix,
Yeah.
and not really knowing what I would be walking into at all if I were to move forward with it.
Interesting. Well, but that to Stephen's point, you can then take control, right? Let's say you do get another chance to meet with them. And even if you don't, I would talk to your recruiter or HR person, whoever your point of contact is, and say, hey, look, you know, I really appreciate your line of questioning. Your obviously culture is important to you. And I have some additional questions about the job. Who would be best to speak with about that? You can ask for that, ask for your needs.
So Shira, you want to get on the resumes?
I
'Cause know the
do,
process.
I do. There's someone on this call who I had an offline chat with and was sharing their resume with me. And I thought, you know, this might be a really good opportunity for me to kind of dive into resumes because I haven't done that. I don't even know when the last time I did a little speech on this. So I'd like to kind of give you a high level concept before I share with you an example. All right. So this is what a resume is, and this is what a resume isn't. What it is an advertising document. What do I mean by that? Well, imagine that you're driving 65 miles down the highway and you see a billboard, okay? And that billboard flashes by you in 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds. And it's for a product, okay? Let's say it's McDonald's that's doing the advertising. Well, McDonald's has various food types and they have various audiences that they've been trying to reach over the years, okay? A long time ago, they wanted people to know that they sold billions of burgers. Lots and lots of people like their burger. For some reason, that was appropriate for that demographic. That was the thing that they have stopped doing that a long, long time ago because people don't care how many burgers they have sold. But they do care, different people care about, well, the taste, you know, it used to be, you know, for people who've been in the wellness journey, oh, well, maybe they offer salads now, whatever. McDonald's has had to figure out who are they targeting. So they might have a billboard, and on that billboard, it might have fries. And then all over here, it has a potato in a potato farm. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to say in 2 seconds, if you're driving down the highway and you're a mom, this is what I'm thinking, you're a mom and your kids want those fries. By the way, a French fry is actually a potato. It's actually kind of healthy, don't you know? Right, okay? They're trying to showcase something to a particular audience in 2 seconds. And I mentioned 2 seconds because that's literally about the time you have to showcase to an employer how you can add value to them. I'm not kidding. I'm really not kidding when I say that's not an exaggeration. If an employer, a recruiter reads your resume, it's about 2 seconds that you have. Some people say 6. I'm going to go with 2 because it's been my experience. On that first page of your resume, you have got to capture their attention very quickly in a way that speaks to their needs. Now, notice that billboard. That billboard was not going to have all of the ingredients in that French fry. A, you wouldn't be able to read it. B, you wouldn't care. You want an image, right? And that's how they're going to grab you. That first page of your resume has got to be compelling. It has got to be keyword focused and it cannot have too much text. What I mean by that is that whatever text you do put, any paragraphs, let's say you put, for example, accomplishment stories, need to be labeled. The labels that you use have got to pop off the page. And I'm going to give you an example because a lot of you know I'm a resume writer. I also write LinkedIn profiles. And I've come up with a template that I believe, in fact, I know this because I've gotten feedback on it, is very recruiter friendly, because I am a recruiter, but also because I've gotten feedback on it. I've actually had people get jobs because they've used this kind of template. Not to say this is the only template. There are a lot of ways you can do it, but I want to give you a concept, okay? And the concept is this: be brief, but if you are going to ever elaborate, make sure that your elaboration has very strong, bolded key competencies. Well, oftentimes the mistake that a lot of job seekers make is this: they say to themselves, I need to share all of my accomplishments, everything I've done with the recruiter. That's not the case. If you do that, you will overwhelm people. If there's too much text, if there's too much verbiage, employers can get very overwhelmed and they don't even know where to focus their eyes. Because here's the deal. Ready? Today, people scan, they don't read. They scan, they don't read. The eyeball goes straight down the page and picks out the key competencies that are most important. If the person wants to go a little deeper, they can look at that little bolded label and then they can read more. But if you have too much text, especially on the first page, literally nobody knows what to do with you. That's the first thing. The second concept is your resume must be customized for every single job. Notice how much silence I'm leaving when I say that. It is very important that you customize. Because if you give somebody a generic resume, your resume says this, but the job description says this, and all of a sudden you're mismatching. They're using certain keywords, you've used other keywords, and they're not seeing the keywords that they need, they can screen right past you. Their eyeballs are focused in on, can this person do this job? Now your resume, so it's fine to have a generic resume, but the generic resume needs to be customized, needs to be tailored. I'm going to share with you this resume that I work on with folks. And it's a concept, okay? Again, it doesn't have to be exactly in this format, but I want to show you why I've set it up this way. So, in fact, I'm going to, there's another font, a sans serif font that I have come to start using very recently. It's even a little easier to read, so I'm going to use this one. Okay, this is a real resume with the redacted information. Okay. So notice here, right, the top of the resume, in journalism they call above the fold, right, is very specific. It's very clean, and it does not have a lot of verbiage. It doesn't have a long summary paragraph. Summary paragraphs is pretty much wasted real estate because people don't really read it. Most people put in their summary, oh, 25 years of experience doing this and this and that. Recruiters usually blow right past that. It's wasted real estate. You want to have a title, a career title that speaks to your career path, but more specifically to the kind of role. So for example, this is a generic resume, right? Let's say she was applying to a specific job and it didn't have a marketing angle. It was really just comms. She could just emphasize the communications and take out the marketing. We put down the fact that she's nonprofit because that's her sector. Well, guess what? If she were applying to something outside the nonprofit sector, she could just take out the word nonprofit, customize it. Maybe it's more of a public relations job, so she could put PR in there. But the point is that you want to be very, very specific toward the role. Right here, I have a little section that talks about kind of who that person's being. Now, there's lots of ways you can do this. This is just my kind of quick and easy way. I say digital media strategist and inbound marketer. It could have been creative thinker or strategic visionary or those kinds of things. If you want to put in any soft skills, this would be the place to do it. Super brief, super easy, right under your title, done. I would not have a long paragraph around it. I'd not have lots of bullets around it because here's the deal. Your resume is being vetted based upon what you do. Your interview is more about who you are. So in your resume, you don't want to emphasize a lot of the soft skills because they're not actually looking for that in your resume. They're looking for the key functional skills around what have you done? Are you qualified? In the interview, it's who are you and are you going to Susan's point actually, right? Are you going to fit in with our culture? That's where they care about the soft skills. Because the fact is you could put a lot of soft skills here and you and 20 other people are going to say the same soft skills. I wouldn't put soft skills in your resume. Focus on hard skills. The next piece of this, okay, is, let's change this it's down here, okay? Now, notice that there's a text box here, and then there's competent, and then there's accomplishments. I really want to focus here. So my belief here is that you need accomplishment stories, okay, that start right away, where your accomplishment stories are labeled. This is exactly what helps recruiters to do that 2-second scan. You can have 1 or 2 labels that label the story. But notice this, if I did not have these labels here, I want to show you what this looks like. This is what most people do. They'll have an accomplishment story. No labels. Now look at this compared to what I just had. Can you read this? Can you scan this? Can you actually see what the story is about? No. These is just want. It's just paragraph, paragraph, paragraph. Okay. Bullets don't do it anymore. That's why it's so important to have these key labels. Whatever you're doing, have a label, a bolded label. Because what will happen is then the eye can scan down. You're making it, you're drawing the reader down the page. You're saying, I'm a Marcom leader, and I have these particular skills. And by the way, these labels, this is exactly what gets customized. This is where you look at the job announcement and say, what are the key competencies that they need? I said communications partnerships, or I said targeted messaging, right? Well, they said, I don't know, they said brand awareness or something, right? Whatever. And you just shift the label, because what you can do is, this is, remember I mentioned the accordion? This is where the accordion comes in. This paragraph has lots of different skills baked into it. This one, we pulled out partnerships. We could have done, oh, I don't know, we could have done a thought leadership here. We could have done whatever. I'd have to think of the communications campaign, whatever. You can think about the skills that are embedded in that paragraph and what is on that job description, and then label, relabel, customize. So I say all this because I think what a lot of people do is they put way too much on their resume, especially on the front page, and it doesn't hang together. The employer cannot do that very quick scan to figure out, is this somebody that I actually want to talk to? By the way, notice I ended this with education. Now, some of you have other things you want to put down: volunteer experience, publications, public speaking you've done, all kinds of things. You can do that. And it's okay to have a 3-page resume. Let me say that again. Okay to have a 3-page resume, not a big deal, because the whole 1- and 2-page concept was back in yesteryear when we used to fax and have hard copy and look the envelope stuff. These days, because it's just a scrolling, 3 pages is fine. Now, I wouldn't really go much past 3 unless you're in academia or in the government, in which case it's 5, 10, and 15. Okay. But in non-academic and non-government, 3 pages, totally fine. Especially if your other ancillary volunteer and, publications and stuff is on the 3rd page, it's fine. But even if you want to have regular things on the 3rd page, it's fine. Not a problem. But what you do need to do is make sure that it is tight and that everything is labeled. Now, by the way, notice that a lot of my paragraphs here are fairly long. The only reason why I could get away with that is because of the label. That gives you a little bit more playroom to give a little bit more detail around your story, okay? And it gives a little bit of detail. Don't go too far with this. Mine are normally about 4 lines or so. Don't give a 7-line, paragraph. That's already way too much, okay? 3 lines, 4 lines is fine, but always make sure to label it. Now, when it comes to your job description, what you've done, this would be the place to do it. A small little paragraph right underneath the title, where you can say kind of generally what you did, kind of budget, how many people you supervised, that kind of thing. A nice little overview of the job. But your accomplishment stories are your SAR stories, your CAB stories that, again, have that label. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that you guys have really got the concept of making sure something is very, very tight and is specifically targeted to the job. Okay, is that helpful? Hong, do you have a question?
About the education, I don't need to put down like when I have completed like that. No?
In fact, for anybody on this call that's over 50,
Yeah.
recommend do not put your years of education. Nope. Put that you list it, but don't put your years, because you don't want any discrimination. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Other questions about this? It's making sense? Just wanted to go into that a little bit. Okay, so we could talk about resumes more. We can talk about anything else you like, but I wanted to at least put that out there for the person on this call that I was having an offline chat with.
Sure, I'm going to share an article that I posted in LinkedIn, which is about the chat GPT-4, if anyone wants to dig into the newest discussion on that.
Thanks for that. Yeah, this is definitely an evolving topic. I think it's taken up a lot of LinkedIn thought leadership space for sure. All right, anything else you guys want to chat about?
It's very good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you as always, Shira.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. All right, well, we can end a couple minutes early. For those of you who want to stay on for the prayer call, you're certainly welcome to do that. Excuse me. Otherwise, look forward to seeing folks next week. All right, have a blessed day, everyone.
Everybody.